Now, Buddhism is a way of thoughtfulness that is not based upon platitudes. We all hear people tell us what to do, and we usually resent them. We are particularly resentful and take refuge in the concept that they tell us what to do, but they're not doing it themselves, and therefore it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it does mean something, but we have a perfect way of rejecting it because the other person isn't fulfilling his own philosophy. But in Buddhism, you do not have this situation at all, because you do not derive authority from other individuals. You derive authority from the one immutable source of authority, nature itself. You learn from living, not being told how to live, but seeing the consequences of your own living. You grow by watching the results of your own action. You unfold because you gradually become aware that it is necessary, not because someone else tells you. You discover the importance of the golden rule, because when you have broken it time after time, you have suffered. So that the final authority in the struggle against suffering is to estimate the consequences of suffering on your own flesh. Of course, you can broaden the scheme a little bit and observe how actions similar to yours by other persons is bringing them suffering. You can gradually come to realize that there are rules, there is a way of life that is acceptable to nature, and nature will never give peace or happiness or friendship until its ways are accepted and followed. This is a very important discovery, but I like the part particularly that it is an experience pattern, that we are not forced to do something because the wise have told us to. We are not forced to do it because our faith demands it. We do it because we cannot survive any other way. And we are becoming increasingly weary of not surviving. We are not having what we should have from a world that can provide us with everything that we need if, as individuals, we do not break the rules of nature and the rules of supply and demand. If we are willing to free ourselves from the terrible struggle of what we might term a materialistic culture, we will not only have better health, better homes, but we will also have a little time left to do something significant. We will have a time to sit down and read a good book. We will have time to go out and help a friend in trouble. We will have time to do many gracious things. But these gracious things are all being sacrificed on the altar of immediate utility. And as a result, we go along until we reach the end, and then perhaps a few hours before we depart, we begin to wonder what it's all about. It is not right for generation after generation of little ones to come into this world without some hope that they will receive the proper instruction necessary to give them a good and happy life. This is something we all have to work on if we expect it to happen. Now, in the course of this good and better and helpful life, there are rules also of things we have to do. One of the rules that Buddhism points out is that the individual, in order to gain the good of his own life, has to gradually take part in the labors of nature. Just as he must weed his own garden if he wants to raise vegetables, so he must help to weed life if he wishes to enjoy the beauties and niceties of existence. He has a community to consider, a community which is allowed to run down, go to pieces. He has a way of environment in neighborhood and in family and in friends, in which he can create gradually a greater amount of beauty, faith, insight, understanding, and security. So we are all gardeners in the world. We are none of us owners of anything. Buddha points that out very clearly in his thinking. We are not owners. We never have anything except a temporary leasehold. We are permitted to have things, but we cannot possess them. And now Buddha brings out the problem of wealth. He was not one of those who thinks we should take everything we have and distribute it among the poor. He said this is not right because this is not the way nature does it. Nature distributes nothing but gives the individual a right to earn anything he wants. It is not to be bountiful that counts. And Buddha said, remember that it isn't the money. Money isn't anything except a medium of exchange. It isn't good. It isn't bad. It is no more significant in itself than a pebble on the beach or a shell in the ocean. It is not what you have. It is what you do with what you have. It's the attitude of possession. If you begin to think of wealth and money as possession, yours, to do with as you please, then gradually money becomes a curse. It becomes more and more of a curse when we give it an authority over life which it never is entitled to. Croesus in antiquity was said to have been the richest man who ever lived. And one day he showed his treasure house to a philosopher. And the philosopher said to him, Croesus, all that gold can be taken from you by a man with more iron. And it so happened. It is always the fact that wealth in itself is a great danger because it increases cupidities and contributes to conflict everywhere. If we had the concept within ourselves that Buddhism teaches, that wealth is something that at best is loaned to us. It is something that for a little time we are able to administer. But that in the administration of it, justice must be the first consideration. Justice with mercy, with love, with insight, and with unselfish understanding. Properly administered, wealth becomes a form of positive growth because it shows that the individual has transcended himself. But wealth dedicated to the advancement of individual projects at the cost of the common good is a sin and will lead to an inevitable accumulation of crimes. So it is not what we have, but what we do with it that determines whether we have peace or we have suffering. Every step of the way, there is a right use that brings peace. In every field of endeavor, there is a wrong use that ends in suffering. And we can't really solve this thing until we begin to estimate the universe in larger terms. Like Christianity, Buddhism had no cosmogony. Originally, Buddhism did not discuss the nature of the infinite or the vast concatenations of worlds. These concepts were in the keeping of the Brahmins, who were the great scientists of Asia. But gradually, with the passing of time, Buddhism divided into two great schools. One of which, the Theravada, or the school, we might say, of strict observances, moved southward in Asia and has its great centers in Thailand and in Lanka and these areas. The other system, the Mahayana, went northward into Tibet and China and finally into Japan and Korea. In this school, cosmogony is introduced from the Hindu, and the days of creation for the Mahayana school are measured much in the same way that Christianity measures creation from the book of Genesis. It was the background for a vast concept of life. Add to the Brahmins reincarnation, which they already taught, and karma, Add to that also the mathematical exactness of their calculations of the great cycles of space. Then add to that the law that we find in Buddhism of eternal progress towards infinite at-one-ment with reality. And you have a universe in which no one can afford to be selfish. The individual who, being a materialist, feels that when he passes from here, no one is going to care, and he is no longer going to know that he ever existed. This seems to be one end of suffering, oblivion. But to work as hard as he does, and use the faculties that he possesses, and bearing witness to a tremendous evolutionary background which has brought him to the present condition, and then assume that he is exterminated, is something the Eastern mind has a great deal of difficulty with. It cannot accept the idea that all this great growth, this tremendous pageantry of evolving life, not only here but in the evolution of stars and suns and galaxies, that all this means nothing, that has no purpose, no reality, and that everything is going to begin and end in the form of cosmic dust. They cannot accept this. So the philosophical systems and nations have always assumed that there is survival, and that survival is subject to certain penalties. In some religions, those who have been naughty, when they leave here, roast in perdition for an unlimited period of time. This concept has lost interest for most people. It is no longer believed. And even in the old days, where the beginnings of the belief can be traced, it was intended as symbolical. It was not intended to indicate a literal place. The individual is not intended to roast in perdition, but he must have a kind of purgatory which is perhaps even more painful in the long run. He must live with himself. He must face the consequences of his own conduct. He must become aware of the misery he has caused. He must realize also how he has frustrated his own growth, how he has destroyed a valuable experience pattern which should have made him a better person. Instead of that, has left him sorrier than before. So what we have thought of as purgatory or perdition is really the inevitable facing of self, the inevitable continuance of an unfinished business until we finish it. Plato pointed out that there could never be a perdition worse than here, that right here in this world is hell, and that all of us come back to it until we learn to be better. But it is possible through integrity to transform hell itself. It is only bad because it is a place where we are required to face the consequences of our own conduct. As our own conduct changes, as our own consequences are regenerated, this world can be what it was intended to be. But in order to be a beautiful world, the beings that come back into it must have achieved within themselves a quality of integrity that makes it impossible for them to pervert or destroy the natural order of things. We have the right to make whatever we deserve and live in the results of our own conduct. So Buddhism, with the addition of reincarnation, and in the Northern School, gives us a great concept of life. A concept of life that in no way conflicts with modern astronomy, because it deals with a dimension which astronomy never touches. In fact, astronomy is apt to completely deny. It has to do with qualitative cosmogony. It has to do with the universe as experience, the universe as wisdom, as love, of strength and of beauty. It is a universe that science cannot touch. but to which it could also